Imagine you're sitting in a small gray room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A detective across from you says, very calmly, "Look, if you didn't do anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about. Just tell me your side." And you believe them, because you're innocent. So you start talking, you explain, you clarify, you help. And within 20 minutes, without realizing it, you've just handed the prosecution the only piece of evidence they need to put you in prison for the next decade. This isn't a scene from a legal thriller. This is real life. And it happens every single day to ordinary people who have no idea that one wrong word, one single sentence, can destroy their case instantly. So here's the question that most people will never ask until it's too late. If you are completely innocent, why should you ever remain silent? Stick with me for the next few minutes, because what you're about to learn will fundamentally change how you see every police interaction for the rest of your life. And by the end of this video, you'll understand something that most criminal defense lawyers wish their clients knew before they ever opened their mouths. But first, we need to talk about a man who made one tiny mistake with his words. A mistake so small, so seemingly polite, that it cost him everything. Let's call him Mike. Mike was driving home late one night. He hadn't been drinking. He wasn't speeding. He was just tired. He crossed the center line for maybe half a second. No accident, no swerving, just a tiny drift. A police officer saw it and pulled him over. Now, Mike is a good guy, respectful, nervous, but polite. The officer asks him, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" And Mike, wanting to be helpful, wanting to show he has nothing to hide, says, "No, sir. I only had 2 beers earlier, but that was hours ago." Here's the problem. Mike just committed a crime. Not the driving, the talking, because in that one sentence he admitted to consuming alcohol before driving. He said only 2 beers, which means he admitted to drinking at least some amount. And in many jurisdictions, any amount of alcohol combined with even a minor driving infraction creates probable cause for a DUI investigation. The officer now has reasonable suspicion based on Mike's own words. Not a breathalyzer, not a field sobriety test, just words. Mike ends up arrested. He blows under the legal limit. But here's what most people don't understand. He still gets charged with operating while impaired because his own statement created doubt. He said he was tired. He admitted to drinking. The prosecutor argues that even if his BAC was legal, the combination of fatigue and alcohol made him impaired. Mike's case was weak. His lawyer told him that if he had simply said nothing, if he had politely declined to answer, the officer would have had almost nothing. A warning, maybe a ticket for crossing the line. But instead, Mike's own words became the foundation of a criminal case. And this is where it gets strange. Almost nobody talks about this part. Most people believe that the Fifth Amendment, or the right to remain silent, only protects guilty people. That's the myth. The cultural story we've all absorbed from movies and TV shows. If you're innocent, you should talk. If you're guilty, you should shut up. But the reality is completely different. The right to remain silent exists precisely to protect innocent people. Think about that for a second. The framers of the Constitution weren't worried about guilty people. They were worried about innocent people being trapped, confused, or manipulated into contradicting themselves. Because here's the psychological truth that police interrogators know better than anyone else. Human memory is terrible. Human perception is flawed. And under stress, even the most honest person will make mistakes. Let me give you an example that might hit close to home. Imagine you're asked, where were you last Tuesday at 7 p.m.? You think about it. You remember having dinner. You say, "I was at home." Later, you check your phone and realize you actually went out for groceries at 7 p.m. You weren't lying. You were just wrong. But now, in a police interview, that looks like a lie. That looks like deception. And once an investigator catches you in one small inconsistency, they will pressure you harder. They will say, "You lied about that, so what else are you lying about?" This is a technique called the Reid technique. It's used by law enforcement across the United States and the United Kingdom, and it is terrifyingly effective at getting innocent people to confess to crimes they did not commit. But here's the hook. You're probably thinking, "I would never confess to something I didn't do." And that's exactly what every single exoneree said before they spent 10 years in prison. There's a famous case from Central Park. 5 teenagers, you've probably heard of the Central Park 5. They were innocent. They confessed after hours of interrogation, not because they were weak, not because they were guilty, because human beings, under enough pressure, will say almost anything to make the stress stop. And it all started with a few words, a few wrong words that turned into a story that the police wrote for them. This changes everything, doesn't it? Because now you're not just worried about lying. You're worried about being honest and accidentally being wrong. So what do you actually say? What are the magic words that protect you without making you look guilty? Almost nobody gives the right answer here. Most people either say nothing at all, which looks suspicious, or they say too much, which is dangerous. But there is a third option, a script that defense lawyers teach their own families. But before I give you that script, you need to understand the one word that destroys more cases than anything else. And it's not a curse word, it's not an admission. It's a word you use every single day without thinking. The word is sorry. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but stay with me. In many legal contexts, an apology can be used as an admission of fault, not just morally, but legally. You rear end someone at a stoplight. You get out, you say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you." In that moment, you have just admitted liability. The other driver's insurance company will use your own words against you. The police report will quote you, and a jury will hear that you apologized, which they will interpret as you admitting you were at fault. And then something unexpected happens. The person you apologized to, the person you were trying to be kind to, sues you for everything you have. Being polite is not a legal defense. Being helpful is not a legal strategy. The justice system does not reward kindness. It rewards precision. Now, let me pause here for a second and ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you said something in the moment and immediately regretted it? Maybe not with police, but with a boss, a partner, or a friend. That feeling of watching your words hang in the air, knowing you can never take them back. Multiply that feeling by 1,000. That's what happens in an interrogation room. But here's the open loop I promised you earlier. Remember Mike, the guy with 2 beers? His case got worse, much worse. And this is where most legal advice you hear on the internet gets it completely wrong. After Mike was arrested, he asked for a lawyer. Good, right? That's what everyone says to do. Ask for a lawyer. Shut up. But Mike made a second mistake. He said, "I think I should probably talk to a lawyer before I say anything else." Those words, I think, and probably, destroyed his protection. Here's why. In both US and UK law, invoking your right to remain silent must be unambiguous. You cannot be wishy-washy. You cannot be polite. If you say, "Maybe I should talk to a lawyer," the police are legally allowed to continue questioning you. They will hear that as uncertainty, and they will exploit that uncertainty. The correct invocation is a single, clear, unambiguous sentence. And it's not what you see on TV. On television, they say, "I want my lawyer." That's fine, but it's not strong enough. The actual legal standard requires you to make it clear that you are unequivocally invoking your rights. Here's the exact language that every criminal defense attorney recommends. And I want you to remember this because it might be the most important sentence you ever learn. You say, "I am invoking my right to remain silent. I will not answer any questions. I want my attorney present before I speak with you." That's it. Then you stop talking. Not another word, not please, not thank you, not I'm sorry, silence. And then something almost magical happens. The police are legally required to stop questioning you. In the United States, if they continue after an unambiguous invocation, anything you say after that point is potentially inadmissible. In the UK, under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, similar protections exist. But here's the twist that almost nobody knows, and this is the part that will blow your mind. Even if you invoke your rights perfectly, even if you say the magic words, you can still accidentally waive them later if you open your mouth again. Let me explain. You're in the room. You've invoked. The detective says, "I respect that, but before your lawyer gets here, can I just ask you one thing off the record? Just between us?" And you say, "Okay, what is it?" Boom. You have just waived your rights. By saying okay, by engaging, by acknowledging the question, the courts will often find that you voluntarily chose to speak. The interrogation continues, and now everything you say is admissible. This is not a trick. This is not a loophole. This is the law, and it is perfectly legal for police to do this. So what do? You stay silent. Not dramatic silence, not angry silence, just neutral, calm, complete silence. You don't shake your head yes or no. You don't nod. You don't shrug. You sit there, and you wait for your lawyer, and I know what you're thinking. That makes me look guilty. And that is the single most dangerous belief you can have. Let me tell you about a study that changed how I think about this. Researchers looked at hundreds of wrongful convictions. The single most common factor among innocent people who were convicted, they talked to police without a lawyer present, not because they were guilty, because they believed that silence looks guilty, so they talked. And then their words were twisted, misinterpreted, or used to build a false narrative. Meanwhile, guilty people who stay silent, they often walk free because the prosecution can't build a case without evidence. The system is designed to protect silence. It is not designed to protect speech. This is the mirror world of criminal justice. What feels right, explaining yourself, being honest, helping, is exactly what hurts you. And what feels wrong, staying quiet, saying nothing, waiting, is exactly what protects you. Now, I promised you real-world examples. So let's talk about a case that made national news in the UK. A man named Barry. He was a teacher, accused of something he didn't do. A student made a false allegation. Barry was devastated. He wanted nothing more than to clear his name immediately. So he went to the police station voluntarily. He sat down. He gave a 4-hour statement. He answered every question. He provided phone records, emails, everything. And the prosecutor used his own statement against him. They found 2 tiny inconsistencies. He said an event happened on a Tuesday, but his phone records showed it was a Wednesday. He said he was in one classroom, but a witness said they saw him in another. These were honest memory errors. But to a jury, they looked like lies. Barry was convicted. It took him 3 years and a very expensive appeal to overturn it. His lawyer later said, if Barry had said nothing, if he had simply said no comment to every question, the case never would have gone to trial. There was no physical evidence. There were no witnesses, only his own words. His own words destroyed him. And this brings me to a question that I want you to really sit with. Why do we feel so compelled to explain ourselves? Why does silence feel so uncomfortable? The answer is psychological. We are social animals. We are conditioned from childhood to answer questions. A teacher asks, why didn't you do your homework? You explain. A parent asks, where were you? You answer. A boss asks, what happened? You clarify. Explanation is woven into our social fabric. But police interrogations are not social situations. They are legal procedures, and the rules are completely different. In fact, they are the opposite of every social instinct you have. Socially, silence is awkward. Legally, silence is power. Socially, explaining builds trust. Legally, explaining builds evidence. Socially, apologizing repairs relationships. Legally, apologizing admits fault. Once you understand that inversion, everything changes. But here's the final loop I need to close. Remember the magic script I mentioned earlier? The one that defense lawyers teach their families? It's not just the invocation I gave you, there's more. If you are ever stopped by police, whether on the street or in your car, you have the right to remain silent from the very first moment. But most people don't know that you have to say something specific to activate that protection in certain situations. In the United States, after the Supreme Court case Salinas versus Texas, simply staying silent is not enough to invoke your Fifth Amendment protection. You actually have to say that you are invoking it. If you just sit there and say nothing, the prosecutor can later argue to a jury that your silence was suspicious. Yes, you heard that correctly. You can be silent, but if you don't announce that you're being silent for legal reasons, the jury can use your silence against you. That's why the script is so important. You must say, I am invoking my right to remain silent. In the UK, the rules are slightly different. You have a right to silence under the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994, but if you remain silent and later rely on something in court that you didn't mention to police, the jury can draw an adverse inference, which is a fancy way of saying they can assume you're lying. This is why you need a lawyer before you say anything. A lawyer will tell you exactly when to speak, when to stay silent, and how to navigate these incredibly specific legal traps. Let me give you one more real-world example, and this one is almost unbelievable. A woman in Florida was involved in a car accident, minor fender bender, no injuries. The other driver was clearly at fault. She got out, exchanged information, and said, "Are you okay? I'm so sorry this happened." The other driver's lawyer used her apology as evidence of fault. Her insurance company had to pay out thousands of dollars, all because of one polite sentence. Now imagine that same dynamic in a criminal case. Instead of money, you're paying with your freedom. So here's where we are. Everything you've been told about talking to police is probably wrong. Your instincts will betray you. Your politeness will be weaponized. Your desire to help will be used to hurt you. And the most dangerous words you can ever say are not curses or confessions. They are the normal, everyday, friendly words that you use without thinking. I want to leave you with something that most lawyers will never say on camera. The truth is, the police are not your friends. They are not your enemies either. They are doing their job. Their job is to gather evidence and solve crimes. And your words are evidence. Beautiful, voluntary, easy to collect evidence that requires no warrant, no probable cause, and no judge's signature. You have the absolute right to not provide that evidence. That right is protected by centuries of law, by the Constitution, and by the very principles of justice. But that right only works if you use it. And using it requires saying a few simple words, then closing your mouth, then waiting. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not guilt. Silence is the difference between going home tonight and spending the next 5 years trying to explain yourself to a jury. So here's my final question for you, and I really want you to think about it. If you were pulled over right now, completely innocent, would you have the discipline to say nothing? Would you? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever been in a situation where your words were used against you, share your story. Because the more we talk about this, the fewer people will make the same mistake. One wrong word, that's all it takes. Don't let it be yours.